Hey everyone, this is Andy Hall. This is the late night show. It's late night for me. It's 10:30. All right, Eastern time. For me, it's late night. For my esteemed co-host, Jack Matirko, it is not 10:30 because
It's
you're in
not
some kind of
particularly late. It's no, I'm Arizona time, so it's 8:30 right now when we get to doing this show in the other half of the year. Which is another thing, by the way. How come standard time is less of the calendar than daylight savings time? Like, that doesn't make sense, but that's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other issue.
But anyway, it's relatively early here. It's only like 8:30. It's fine.
Right. With us tonight is our guest from the Dragons in Genesis podcast, Jason Foux. Jason Foux, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm good. I'm tired, but I'm good.
Right, you're on the road, correct?
Yes. If you notice, I don't have my fancy background with like the religious painting over my shoulder or anything like that, or the nice lighting. I'm in the driver's lounge at one of my company's operating centers in New Jersey. So,
wow.
Which exit?
I don't remember the exit number. I remember how to get here. I don't even look at landmarks anymore. I could drive up here in my sleep.
So are you off of the Jersey Turnpike? Are you right on it?
Yes. There's a window to my left on the other side of the room, and if I look out of it, I can actually see a bridge that goes over the it's actually a bridge on the Jersey Turnpike.
Cool.
So yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So Jason, for people who are not acquainted with your podcast, or you want to give them some information, a couple of sentences, a paragraph maybe, about what you're all about.
Yeah, so I run a podcast called Dragons in Genesis, and it's sort of like a secular Bible study podcast, but also, I guess, sort of a comparative mythology podcast. And what I do is I look at the Bible and the Bible stories through the lens of comparative mythology. And I break down the stories, essentially going over what the story says, what it's about, its historical context, what it means for the literary context, like where it is in the Bible, things like that. And then, of course, where did the story come from? Was it original to the region of ancient Palestine, or did it come from, some other place? Did it come from Iran? Did it come from Egypt? Did it come from Greece? And so we go into things like that. So basically you just get an understanding of it.
There must be a little, did that story's God not necessarily mesh with the God they were trying to make on the Bible side, and so they just labeled that one Satan and kind of put that aside?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of that. Because as this theology grows and expands and takes on new forms, certain stories that they have or certain stories that they incorporate may not fit with a new version of the theology. So the new story has to change so that it can be incorporated, or an old story has to change so they can hang on to it instead of tossing it out. So gods sometimes get turned into demons or angels or even people. So yeah, lots of things have to get changed to keep them around.
What I really like whenever you come on the show, Jason, is that I get to read stuff. I get to get smarter. Your last podcast was about Paul's letter to the Corinthians, the 2 letters. And, I read through, before you came on tonight, I reread through 1 Corinthians. I said to myself, I had no idea that there was this bit in there about banging your stepmom.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I was making that up, but no. Apparently, banging your stepmom was an issue for the Church of Corinth.
Yeah. Them Corinthians, they had some issues. Basically, and that's actually almost like the backbone of everything that's going on, not just with 1 Corinthians, but with 2nd as well, because these 2 letters weren't really 2 letters. They were maybe like 5 or 6 different letters. And all they had when they were gathering these things up, they were just like in fragments. And so they just shuffled them all together and was like, okay, this is the first half, this is the second half, done. And so things are all out of order and it's a mess. But at the heart of it all, there's this guy, we never get his name, and he's sleeping with his stepmom. And this is a problem. And Paul is trying to get this sorted out. He's like, you can't sleep with your stepmom. And the Corinthians, yeah, he's got to say this, you know. And this causes a bunch of other problems that Paul has to deal with, because Paul doesn't get along with Cephas, who is also called Peter. He doesn't get along with him at all. Like, he calls him a demon at one point in, I think, 2 Corinthians. He's like, yeah, he's a devil. Like, he literally says this. And so Cephas tries to discredit Paul by saying, hey, look, if Paul obeyed the Torah like he was supposed to and preached the Torah, we have laws against, you know, like banging your stepmom. And so if Paul taught our version of Christianity, he wouldn't do this. So it causes a problem there, because he's like, yeah, look, you know, Paul isn't teaching the right way, and so you end up with dudes sleeping with their stepmom in your congregation. And so he not only has to deal with this guy and his stepmom, he now has to deal with these dissenters that have been sent by Cephas to stir up trouble in his church. And so that causes more problems. Oh, let me write another letter about that and call Cephas a demon. And so
let's do some clarification moments here for people who are just tuning into the show. In 1 Corinthians, there's basically a mention about an unnamed person whose his father died, right?
Mm-hmm.
Passed on, and he has decided to, or you know, he and his stepmom in some kind of weird Pornhub kind of manner found
Dear Abby mashup, writes a letter.
Yeah. And so basically this guy's dad died and he just started banging his stepmom. And there were some people in the church in Corinth who were like, I don't see anything wrong with this.
It's perfectly fine.
Right.
Yeah. And Paul actually goes to Corinth at one point and confronts the guy. And the guy berates Paul. We don't know what exactly he said, but Paul has to respond to this, because when he has his confrontation with the guy, the Corinthian church took the other guy's side. And so Paul runs off with his tail tucked between his legs, and he's like, how did this get so out of control? Like, this dude is sleeping with his stepmom. Peter is trying to instigate all sorts of trouble. The Corinthians turned against me. And yeah, it's a giant mess.
What I'm hearing is, on the steps of the church, Paul and this dude had basically like a rap battle, and the other guy won, but Paul knew how to write, so he sat down and wrote down his side of the story, and the other guy couldn't, you know, come back from that, because that dude was illiterate, but he was really good at talking smack.
Yeah, and that is actually a thing that Paul also addresses in there. Paul, and I literally call him this in there, he is a keyboard warrior. Paul is an internet troll, okay? And I literally point out examples to this. And he basically says this, because he's like, yeah, look, when I'm up there in person, I'm basically like a weakling. And he's like a coward. And he tries to like talk to these people, and they just shut him down, and he doesn't know what to do. So then he runs back home, and he grabs his pen, and he just starts slinging insults, okay? He goes Slim Shady on these dudes, and he writes these letters, and the dude, like, the amount of snark and sarcasm that Paul can lay down it's epic. It is fantastic. It is amazing. But by his own admission, when he's up there in person, he's not much to deal with. And so he's basically an internet troll and a keyboard warrior. And it's amazing because that comes across in most of his letters. He's a troll, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, there's like I said, I just went over 1 Corinthians tonight, and there seems to be a lot of passive aggressiveness, some snark.
Oh yeah,
in there about a variety of different topics.
Oh yeah. He loves being passive aggressive. He's amazing with that. And not just in Corinthians. There's this one I'm working on. Is it 1 Thessalonians or Galatians? In one of those, he's talking to, he's writing a letter to one of these congregations, and he's basically kind of complaining that he constantly has to sort out their problems for them. And his way of doing it is amazing. I was literally laughing when I read this. He comes along and he basically says that he wishes he could die so he could be with his Lord, but he's willing to stick around just to get them back on track because they need him that much. And it's like,
I want to die, but I'm staying alive for you. That is the weirdest guilt trip, right?
Yeah. Oh, he is the master at guilt trips. Like, he is perfect at guilt trips.
What I noted, at least in 1 Corinthians, was his attitude towards marriage. And I don't know if there's ever been a psychoanalyst to do a little, of a write up on Paul, but there's a lot of passive aggressiveness there. There's I don't need to have sex, but if you need to have it, then this is what
you weaker thing, you. Yeah. No, it's weird. And then there's the basically like, well, what I think you should do is abandon your families and give everything because, this is all going to be over before I die. That's part of Paul's trip is like the end is coming before I'm gone. And here we are still waiting. So,
yeah. I think he, I don't know. He had an old calendar. Like his calendar didn't work very well. But yeah, I think his whole thing, he's really good at taking his weaknesses and trying to pretend that they're a strength. Because he's like, oh yeah, when this guy basically just, crushed me in person, he's like, I was just trying to be humble. And then he goes on to talk about how he is more humble than anyone else. And then he goes on to talk about how when he is boasting, it's actually a good thing because boasting from a weakling like himself just shows the greatness of his Lord. Because if the Lord can use someone as weak as him to do something as grand as write these letters where he just, drops sarcasm and guilt trips and everything else, then that shows how good the Lord is, not how good Paul is, because that would be improper boasting. He does proper boasting. And he works more miracles than any of the other apostles, and he says this. And he can also speak in tongues better than anyone, even though that's a crappy use of the gifts of the Spirit, but he still does it better. And he literally says that.
Dude, you know what I found hilarious? What I found hilarious about this whole talking in tongues thing is that he recommends to the church, it's like, listen, if someone from the outside walks into your church and you all are talking in tongues, they're going to think you're crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm only paraphrasing it just a little bit.
Yeah, he's like, be careful because people are going to think that Christians are nuts because you're all flailing about and speaking in tongues and everything else. He's literally saying this in his letters to the Corinthians. He has a very dim view of glossolalia. He does not like it. And one of the big reasons is that this practice can essentially lead to a lot of new teachings, because if anybody, if just any random person can be like, oh, I got this message, from an angel. An angel just, well, now you got a new doctrine. And then Paul has to write another letter and get them back on track. And this was a huge problem. I mean, they talk about this back in Deuteronomy. They're like, if a new prophet comes along and his message does not coincide with the Torah, then you should kill him. Paul doesn't go that far. He just says that, they're idiots, and they should just listen to him. He doesn't say you should like hit them with rocks until they're dead. So we're making progress. But now I want to go back to something real quick, because earlier when we were talking about the immoral man who's sleeping with his stepmother and all the problems with that, you said that it was in like this weird like Pornhub sort of way. And well, this is a little bit off topic, but I now have merchandise that is sort of Pornhub inspired. It's perfectly PG. Like, your children could wear this, but it's a shirt, and it says Bible study on it. Because if you study the Bible, you should be proud of that. It's just that the Bible study words uses basically the same format as the Pornhub logo, so it's very recognizable.
That's genuine.
You're very subversive, Jason.
And if I were at home in my studio, then you would actually see one of the shirts right behind me on the wall, because I have one now.
Fantastic. Inspired.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah. But yeah, so the Corinthians is a giant mess, and Paul has a lot to deal with in there.
Yeah, a lot of it seems to be about men and women.
Mm-hmm.
And can you explain it to me? Can you explain the entire headscarf, head covering thing with women? Because Paul seems to go, he spends a lot of ink. He spends a lot of ink trying to explain his position, but he seems to have it's somewhat ambiguous at times.
Yeah, so Paul's thing, he's sort of like a chameleon. He's trying to appeal to a bunch of different groups of people. And so he'll sometimes say something so that it looks like he's siding with one group, but then he realizes that may ostracize another group. So then he turns around and he's like, well, maybe we should also do this instead. And to try to appeal to both groups, because he has Christians who observe the Torah, and he has Christians who used to be pagans, the Gentile Christians. And they come from very different backgrounds. They have very different views. And so Paul kind of flip-flops on a lot of things. And one of the things he kind of goes into here is this thing with women covering their heads while they're in church. Mm. And people are like, oh, he's like, what is this? Is it sort of, like Islam? You got to, wrap up in a burqa. But it seems pretty clear that's not what Paul is getting at. He has a different reason, and it's really weird. So if you read the book of Enoch, and anyone who knows me knows I'm going to go
back to the book of Enoch, Jason.
Right.
Goes back to the book of Enoch.
If you read the book of Enoch, but Paul, it's not just me making connections that aren't there. He's actually referencing this, and he talks about it. If you read the book of Enoch, there's this weird thing that happens around chapter 7, I believe, somewhere around there. A bunch of angels, they come down from heaven, and they have sex with a bunch of human women, and that creates a race of giants that are 4,500 feet tall, and they eat everything on earth. Then they start drinking each other's blood, and it just goes crazy. And then to fix it, God has to flood the entire world, and that's where you get Noah's flood and the ark, and so it's a big mess. So you probably want to prevent angels and women from sleeping together, because it's a bad thing. Okay. Now, in church, you are basically one of the things you're doing is you're basically connecting the material world with the spirit world, and these two things are kind of coming closer together, and there's almost like some overlap. And the whole way that glossolalia, or speaking in tongues, the way that works is you are getting angels, you're basically inviting them into the congregation to whisper into your ear, to take over your mouth so that you can deliver these divine messages. So you got angels in the room, but you also have women in the room. You don't want that to mix, because these angels, yeah, they're going to come in there. In the 21st century, we have a very different view of angels. You know, they have like the fluttery wings, and, you know, they're all good and they deliver messages and stuff. No, that's not what they had. Their angels were kind of like the Greek gods. They had a really hard time keeping it in their pants. And so if the angels came into your congregation, that could be a bad thing. And there's no way to like put a blindfold on the angels. You know, you can't even find them. So you're like, okay, ladies, we need you to cover your heads when we start bringing the angels into the buildings, because we don't know what they're going to do.
Because they're looking down from the top, and if they can't see the top of your head, it's like you're not there. It's like the bug glass.
Yeah, it's like, put it on, done. You know, and he's basically saying this. He, you know, I think it's 1 Corinthians. He's like, yeah, you know, you got to cover your heads, ladies, because we have angels coming into the building. Okay, you know, I mean, if Cardinal Pell in Australia was coming to your house and your daughter was there, you know, well, I just wouldn't let him in, but, you know, you know,
right. It's just angels are coming. Hide your wife, hide your kids, right? Like,
right? Yeah, that's what you got to do, you know, because these things were powerful, you know.
Tons of mice from the chat says angels sure knew how to party.
Yeah, they could be scary. You know, they weren't the nice things that we have now. That they were terrifying, which is why whenever they pop up, they start off by shouting, "Be not afraid," you know, like just some dude in white robes with wings. That wouldn't make any sense. No, these things were horrifying. You didn't want to be anywhere near them. So they pop up, "Be not afraid," and you're like, you know, yeah, they were terrifying. You couldn't control that, so you make your women put something over their heads so that, you know, you can avoid trouble.
Blazing Wizard Pope also mentions, of course, that the Nephilim, the angel,
Genesis 6:1-3, I believe. You know. Yep.
Yeah. So, you know what once again, the Book of Corinthians, it's a short book, of course, but it's so jammed packed full of crazy stuff in it.
Oh yeah.
There was this part about this really toxic feudalistic structure between God, a husband and his wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's actually like memes about this going around. Seen one with like umbrellas, and, you know, it's like, you know, God is the top umbrella, and then you've got like Jesus, and, you know, like God is the head of the spirit, and then like Jesus is the body, and he's like the head of the husband, and then the husband is the head of the family, and, you know, all the way down to like the wife and then the kids. It's oh, sorry, what's that?
Turtles.
Yeah. But yeah, so it was like, it shows this very hierarchical structure that they envisioned. And, you know, the way it was, you know, you're basically in public, what you would want is, if the women, you know, who were married wanted to, you know, say or do something, well, since they were technically property of their husbands, it wasn't their place to just try to do it. They have to go and get permission from their husband, you know. And so that's basically what they're looking at there. And of course, the husbands, they're supposed to be, you know, obeying Christ and then leading their wives by saying, okay, you know, this is what you should do. You know, the man upstairs told me, you know, and so it's like this whole trickle down thing, you know. A tells B, B tells C, C tells D. So,
and then you have all these widows that try and start their own businesses, and you have to call them witches. And
oh yeah. Now Paul does do something weird that this is probably another thing that Cephas wouldn't have liked because he was Torah observant. But Paul has a very different view of women than most people in early Christianity, at least from what we know. So at the end of his letter to the Romans, chapter 16, he's like, yeah, you know, say hi to all these people, you know, over there. And he starts listing all these different people and who they are and what they do. And he's like, you know, say hi to this person. And it's a woman. And he's like, you know, say hi to this person, you know, who's a deacon. It's like, wait, you've got a deacon? And what's really weird is they had two different words for deacon. There was the regular title of deacon, and then there was a feminine form for the word deacon. And it denoted a female deacon who had basically fewer duties. Like she couldn't do all the stuff a deacon could do. But Paul doesn't use that word. He uses the full form of deacon. So he's talking about a woman who is a deacon in his church who has all the authority of a full deacon. And he's like, treat her the way you would treat me. You know, she comes with my full authority. And it's like, that's odd. And then later Christians actually try to change the names of some of these women to make it masculine names, even going so far as to come up with names that did not exist. Like Junia gets turned into Junius, which kind of sounds like a masculine Greek name, only that's not an actual name. And in our oldest manuscripts, that's not what the name is. It's Junia. It's a woman. He talks about an apostle who is, I think he says, like, noteworthy among the apostles. So this isn't just like someone going out and spreading the word. This is someone that all the apostles should look to. And in I think 1 Corinthians, Paul gives a list of the gifts of the Spirit, and he arranges them in order. And he does this twice. And apostle is always at the very top of the list. So when he's saying that this woman is like noteworthy among the apostles, he's like, she is one of the most important people in the early church. Like flat out, that is what he's saying. He mentions like a husband and wife team in which the woman is listed first and then the husband. And it's like, that normally it was like, you know, this is Bob and his wife, who doesn't even get a name, you know. And so he does this numerous times, you know, and not just there, like, you know, in 1 Corinthians, he's talking about women who are giving prophecy. So he's got like female prophets. So yeah, he has a very different view of women than you would expect from someone living in that day. I think in there, when he's talking about the whole hierarchy, he's trying to appeal to the men who basically claim ownership of their wives. Because, well, you know, like I said, he tries to appeal to everyone.
Yeah, you know, and even in that section that we're talking about right now, is that he goes back and forth. And it's funny. That's what it is. He goes that, you know, as woman came from man, man is over woman, but let's not forget that man comes from women. And
yeah.
Just trying to do a whole
trying to get it in there. He's like,
yeah. So he goes like, he spends quite a bit of ink on this, trying to have it both ways.
Yeah, he frequently does this. when it comes to the topic of food.
Food.
Because you got people who are eating pagan meat. That's a problem. You could have demon meat.
Explain pagan meat to the audience, please.
Okay, so let's say you're running a temple, okay, and you got to, sacrifice a cow to, whichever god you have. They had hundreds of gods. So you got a temple, you need to sacrifice a cow. Okay, so you get your cow, you kill your cow, and you take a little piece of meat, you burn it up. And so your god now has his cheeseburger. Cool. Well, now you just slaughtered a whole cow so that you could sacrifice, or make an offering the size of, a quarter pounder. What do you do with the rest of the cow? You got like a ton of meat, literally a ton of meat sitting out back. Well, you sell it to the market, and then they chop it all up and they sell it to people. Cool. That you don't want to waste anything. You want to get paid for that cow. But there's a problem. You have got a Christian who only believes in one God, and he goes into this meat market and he gets some food. Where does that food come from? Like, they didn't have a stamp that said certified kosher. That didn't get invented yet. So what do you do? Like, how do you know if the meat you bought, from Joe's meat market is certified kosher, or did it get, sacrificed to Dionysus or something? What do you do? And if you eat this meat, knowingly or unknowingly, is that a sin? Because we've got rules back in the Torah that say if you do that, that's wrong. And basically, if you violate any rule in the Torah, including picking up sticks on Saturday, the punishment is that you die horribly. And so you go buy a kebab in the bazaar and you find out later that was pagan meat. What happens? Like, are you safe? Do you die? How do these laws work now that, we have this whole new teaching? And Paul is like, look, people, there's really only one God. And so those people who sacrificed to these pagan gods, those gods don't exist. So their magic can't corrupt the meat. So it's just meat. And then he turns it around.
One of those gods do exist, but God just doesn't want to talk about it, right?
Right. Yeah. And he even kind of goes into that. And he's like, well, if you feel that this would be leading you astray, that eating this meat makes you feel like you're offering a sacrifice, then you shouldn't do it. Because his whole thing is he doesn't want people to have any reason to step out of line. Okay. And he also doesn't want to make it look like he's being too lenient, because then that gives people like Cephas a way to come in and criticize him. And
so this brings me to one of the weirdest bits of Catholic theology that I'm aware of, which is the capybara. Are you familiar with capybara?
Yes. And the beaver, because both of those are considered fish.
Yes.
I'm Catholic. Not anymore, but once a Catholic, always a Catholic.
But that's what amazes me, because that's the one where it's just like, okay, you're saying 130-pound rat is a fish.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to fight that fight with the people who like to eat it as part of their celebration. You're just like, all right, so we're just making shit up as we go along. That's pretty much the rules here at this point.
Yeah. Basically, they were trying to convert people down, in the Amazon, and they're like, yeah, so during Lent, they can only eat fish.
But this happens.
They have piranha, and no one's going to try to eat a piranha. Piranha eats you. You can't reverse that. They're like, okay, capybara. They like eating that. Capybara's a fish.
They spend enough time in the water. They're a fish.
Yeah, its fur gets wet. Fish. This also happened in Canada, and I think one state, Minnesota maybe, with beavers, because they were like, yeah, so like it was a bishop. He wrote a letter to the Pope. He wrote a letter to the Vatican. He's like, yeah, so everyone just like traps beavers up here, and they really want to eat them. They don't have a lot of good fish up here because, well, you know, it's Canada and it's just always frozen. We don't have water. We have ice.
Don't give them beavers or fish. They're going to starve.
Yeah. And so they're like, beavers or fish. And so the Pope was like, okay, yeah, sure. So a bishop wrote a letter to the Vatican asking if they could reclassify beavers as fish. And he's like, it has like a big fin on its tail and it swims around in the water a bunch. And Pope is like, that's a fish. That sounds like a fish to me.
However, scientific classification before, you know, we knew that DNA was in, folks. That's how it worked before science. Beavers are fish. They spend a lot of time in the water. That was science before science.
And what's weird though is, so a beaver is a fish, but a platypus is not. I mean, come on, it lays eggs.
Oh, they didn't even know about platypus at that point, right? Australia was not a thing on that map at that point.
Yeah. Then again, you know, in was it Leviticus or Numbers? One of those two says that bats are birds and insects have 4 legs. So, I mean, if bats are birds, then I guess beavers can be fish.
Sure, why not? If we're just making stuff up.
Exactly.
Right.
Just go with it.
Yeah. And rabbits chew cud also. It says that in there, plain as day.
Well, one of my favorite crazy parts was about the animal breeding. About who was it? Was it Jacob with the zebras?
Yes.
If you explain it, I mean, I could try to explain it, but I think you would probably do it eloquently.
So Jacob pissed off his brother and had to go on the run so his brother wouldn't kill him. And so he goes into hiding and he's hanging out somewhere else with this other dude, and he's trying to hook up with this guy's daughter, or daughters, plural. He gets married to both of them, and they're handmaidens. So he gets 4 wives out of this deal. And so he goes over there and he's trying to basically get rich. And because this guy with these daughters is like, look, I don't know if I can let you, marry my daughters. You don't really have anything. And he's like, okay, look, I'll work for you for a while. I'll tend your flocks. And as payment, you give me all of the goats that have stripes on their fur, and you keep all of the goats that have solid fur. He's like, okay, that sounds like a good payment. And so Jacob, who understands far more about science than I do, he goes to this little watering hole and he paints stripes on a bunch of sticks and he puts them up near the water. And all the pregnant goats, when they're drinking the water, they see the striped sticks. And because this is how genetics works, if a pregnant goat sees a striped stick, her kids will be born with striped fur. And so all of the goats that are born that season have stripes on them. And so Jacob's like, man, I got a lot of goats now. And his father's like, oh my God, I don't know if I can keep on with this deal. And Jacob's like, okay, here's what we'll do. You get all of the goats that are born with striped fur, and I'll keep all the ones with solid fur. And God's like, okay, cool. We'll go with that deal. And so Jacob's like, cool. So he puts a bunch of sticks up there that are all painted one color. And so the pregnant goats see the sticks when they're drinking water, and bam, all the goats are born with solid fur. And Jacob's like, because he now has like all of the goats Because like for years in a row, I forget how many years he worked there. I think it was like 14 years or something.
Verge on the difference between Sneetches and star-bellied Sneetches.
Right. So yeah, he got those with stars upon theirs, and so he does it. He keeps pulling this con, and he ends up with like all of the goats. And he's like, okay, well, I've got this massive herd, and I've married your 2 daughters, and I've got their handmaiden. So I think I'm gonna bail out now. And so then he basically leaves with like this giant thing of goats, half with stripes and half without, and the dude's wives. And I can't remember if those wives were also Jacob's cousins or not. I think they were, but don't quote me on that. I haven't read that one in a while. I know his mom and dad were cousins.
Right.
Isaac married his cousin for sure. I don't remember if Jacob did or not.
Blazed Wizard a while back. How exactly does a regular-sized woman, give birth to a 4,500 foot giant? Good question, Blazing. Good question.
Very carefully.
Yeah, cesarean section, magic. I think maybe
Magic.
like they gave birth to like regular-sized babies, and then they just kept growing and growing and growing, or maybe it was like on Alien, and they just popped out of their chest. I don't know. It doesn't say. It just Enoch just tells us that the offspring grew really big. And also later,
there's speculation that the archaeological underpinnings of that was elephant skulls.
Yeah.
Cyclops thing skull,
Yeah. You look at an elephant skull, and it matches up quite well with our Greek descriptions of the Cyclops, because they talk about how the Cyclops has like this one gigantic eye. It doesn't just say like it has an eye in the middle of its head. It has a gigantic eye, which looks like the nasal passage on an elephant skull. And then they also are described as having 2 great teeth, 2 great tusks. And those are 2 really strange features. That's a really weird way of saying a giant, Like you don't just say a giant. They're like, no, this giant had a gigantic eye in the middle of its head and 2 great tusks.
Yeah, it's like this pre-literate farmer person coming across an elephant skull and trying to do like one of those reconstructions that CSI people do with skulls to figure out what the face looked like, and just getting it entirely wrong.
Well,
yeah.
Jason, and the last time you were here, we were talking about the Book of Enoch, and I think you mentioned that there were pygmy elephants. On the Creek.
Yeah, we on the Greek Isles, we actually had sort of like dwarf elephants. I don't know exactly how big they were, but often whenever you have an animal that's on an island, over time they tend to shrink. They get smaller and smaller. And so we actually had some that survived to a fairly late date. And so like when we're talking about some of these Greeks finding, like skulls of, some kind of like pygmy elephant, we're not talking about fossilized remains. We're talking about bones, because several thousand years ago, these things are still alive, so.
I'm bummed.
So, yeah.
I would get a pygmy. Like if I could get an elephant that never got higher than like 3 feet, I would get one as a pet. Like, totally. That sounds great. They're just adorable. Baby elephants. Oh, they're the best.
Well, how much do you think that baby elephant weighs?
Well, like a 3 foot. Yeah, but that's okay.
I don't think these were that pygmy, because I think these elephants were still like
these are like horse-sized elephants.
Yeah, this was like a cow elephant or maybe bigger. I don't know. I never really studied the Greek elephants.
Right.
You know, I don't get a chance to look into everything I come across. But look those up. It was a nifty little part of history. And its relation to the Cyclops is pretty cool.
Yeah, I found that fascinating. So, Jason, I have to ask you, out of, because you interact with atheists all the time, people who don't believe in God, what's the most common thing that atheists don't understand about the Bible, do you think?
Oh, the most common thing that atheists don't understand about the Bible. Let me think about that for a second. That's a good one, because there's a lot that people get wrong about the Bible. Okay. I see this one all the time, and it drives me bonkers. The idea that the Bible says that God sacrificed himself to save mankind from himself. That is nowhere in the Bible. That everyone gets that wrong all the time. That is not what the New Testament says. And I'm going to catch hate for this. People are going to start sending me messages within the next hour. Definitely tomorrow I'm going to get some messages. That's totally what it says. I shared that meme yesterday. It's got to be true. But no, that's not what it says. Repeatedly throughout the New Testament, it says that Jesus had a dad. There's God, and then there's Jesus, and God is his father. They're two separate things. They are not the same. Romans chapter 1, we've got it in, I think, both letters to the Corinthians. We've got it 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. I think within the first 3 verses of 1 Thessalonians, it says God and his son, the Lord Jesus Christ. These are two completely separate entities. In the Gospels, they're even the demons get it right. They're in Mark, the demons are you are the son of the God Most High. So even in there, he had a dad. And this is most likely the Canaanite god El Elyon, which is literally what God Most High means. El Elyon means the God Most High. And his favorite son was also called the Lord. This was Yahweh. And that's another thing. The God Most High and Yahweh are not the same thing. The Old Testament goes to great lengths to try to convince you that they were. But that's just them. They're monotheistic, and they're trying to pretend they've always been, and that they didn't have 70 different deities, that they once worshipped. Look at Deuteronomy 32:8. It says, El Elyon divided the nations of the world up and gave each nation to one of his sons, and the nation of Israel he gave to his son Yahweh. A lot of your modern Bibles change that. They manipulate the words. Look at our oldest copies. That's what it says. And he wasn't sacrificing himself to save us from himself. It was a whole thing about purification. He was basically, the Christ figure was trying to get himself killed because the purification ritual, the Day of Atonement ritual, was designed to essentially replenish nature. And it was this annual thing you had to do. And this was a way of doing one big sacrifice. I mean, look, sacrificing plants can only go so far. Sacrificing animals is more powerful. Once upon a time, they sacrificed people. And we have hints of this throughout the Bible. They used to human sacrifice. We've got references in Exodus that they did it. And then later they're we don't do that anymore. Instead, sacrifice an animal in its place. But they didn't catch all of them. There's at least one where it says, your firstborn son, you sacrifice to Yahweh. So they had a human sacrifice. That was the most powerful. But even that didn't work. The world was still impure. It still had problems. What else could you do? Well, what if we sacrificed a god? And so this is this whole thing, and this isn't even from them. This goes back thousands and thousands of years. The oldest one we have is, at least the oldest written one we have, is Inanna, who was worshipped in ancient Israel. I think Isaiah complains about that there are Jews worshiping Inanna in the city of Tyre. But you always have one of the deities who is like the son or daughter of the main god, who often sacrifices themselves to basically purify or rejuvenate nature. And that's what that is. It wasn't God sacrificing himself to himself. It was him basically spilling his blood to purify the universe. And the earliest Christians didn't seem to think that humans had any involvement in it. It says repeatedly that it was angels that killed Jesus. It was sky demons, basically.
Sky demons. Blazer says we have to sacrifice more gods.
Yeah. That's probably how. Like, we've tried everything else. I mean, that's got to be how we get rid of COVID, right?
Yeah, dude, totally.
Yeah, we'll go find one and nail them up or something.
Yeah,
I mean, it's worth a shot,
Sure.
And if it doesn't work, we could try another one or just try something else. I mean, what are we going to lose? They don't answer prayers anymore, so
Crime Blaster says human sacrifice is not a crime. There are so many of them who will miss a few. Sacrifice your neighbor and take his house. You won't have to worry about refinancing.
We totally mows his lawn. Yeah.
Yep. So Jason, what are you working on? When's your next podcast episode dropping anyway?
It will be dropping this coming weekend. I should have it all done. There are a handful of little things that I didn't get to cover in the 2 letters to the Corinthians, and those will be in the beginning of the episode, and then after that, I'm going to try to cover the rest of Paul's letters in that one episode. So that'll be 1 Thessalonians, Galatians, Philippians, and Philemon, or Philemon, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Which those are all really short letters, so I think I can get them all in there.
Sounds like an ambitious episode.
Yeah. Once upon a time, my episodes were like 20 or 25 minutes long, and then I accidentally did one a little bit longer, and then that kind of became the new standard, and then they just kept getting longer and longer and longer. And
you should do like a Patreon stretch goal where it's like, I'll Dan Carlin the shit out of this thing for 5 hours.
Oh God, I'm trying to not do that. But like Corinthians, that was the second longest episode. The only one longer was I think the secret name of Yahweh, which was sort of like a culmination of a mini series that I did a little over a year ago. But that one was only longer by a couple of minutes. So unfortunately, now I'm doing like 45-minute episodes for all of them, sometimes longer. So
it's a good length.
Yeah. I just wish I had more time to do them.
Oh, yeah.
But,
yeah.
I work 70 hours a week, so I don't have much free time.
Oh, yeah. Well, I imagine because you're driving around a lot. So, dude, I have to tell you, I have to ask you, are you driving on Inauguration Day? Are you which is Wednesday this week? Are you going to be in a safe area? Nothing too crazy?
I have no idea where I'm going to be. So look, I don't even know what time zone I'm in half the time. Like my girlfriend will call me and she's like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, I have no idea. Let me check. And I have to pull out my phone to find out where the hell I'm at. It's like I pick up a load tomorrow, I'll drive several hundred miles. Next day, I'll be in another state, and the next day I'll be somewhere else. So I have no idea where I'll be. Probably Eastern time, because I'll be going home this weekend, so they're not going to send me too far away. But as far as which state, get the eastern half. Yeah, look, get the eastern half of the country and throw a dart, and that's as good a guess as any.
Everything from the North Carolina, South Carolina border to about Allentown on the 95 is just going to be shitty.
Yeah.
All week.
Yeah. I'm actually going to be running down to North Carolina soon, 'cause that's where I live. But I'm really good at avoiding trouble spots when it comes to traffic and major cities and stuff. Like, I don't even get anywhere near Baltimore and DC anymore. Yeah. I go around. So
that's good. That's good.
Because I mean, yeah, it may add 50 miles, but it'll save 5 hours. So
I would take the 5-hour drive around to Baltimore. That's not even an issue for me.
Yeah. Actually, like if you're in the New York area and you're going like someplace like, say, North Carolina, it's actually quicker to go straight west to Harrisburg and then start dipping south.
No, interesting.
Yeah. And the distance isn't that much more going that route. But once you factor in like Baltimore, DC traffic, it's way faster.
Yeah,
I know. I've driven both routes probably 200 times.
So, hey, we're getting to the end of the show. Was there a question you wanted us to ask you, but we didn't get to? Not about plugs or where people can find you online, but was there a topic you wanted to touch on, but we just didn't get around to? It can be about anything.
Let's see. There was something I thought of earlier dealing with Paul and then got sidetracked and now I forgot it.
Well, I gotta say congratulations too, brother, for coming on the show, because this is one of the few times we don't talk politics here.
Yeah, I hate politics. Like it's weird. I don't even talk religion on my podcast. Yeah. But it's a Bible study podcast, and I don't even talk about religion. Go figure. So yeah. But whatever it is that I thought of, it's in that last episode that covers Corinthians. So everyone who's watching, if you want to know my answer to the question that Andy didn't ask, that I can't remember what the question could have been, get a podcast app, search Dragons of Genesis, and find the latest episode concerning the Corinthians. It's called Dear Corinth. Yes, that is Eddie Izzard. No, that person needs to be banned. No politics. I'm gonna ban him from the Dragons of Genesis page as soon as we get done here.
Great dude.
No, so go check out the last episode of Dragons of Genesis. It deals with the letter to the Corinthians, and you'll find my answer to the mystery question that wasn't asked. So yeah, don't know what it was, but there you go.
I also want to say, I know we touched on the Book of Enoch. Jason was here maybe about a month ago, and we sat down and I listened through his 5-part series on Enoch.
Like 7, something like that. It was ridiculous. It was supposed to be like 2 episodes.
And if you want to see, it's obviously on my channel. We had an hour-long conversation about the Book of Enoch, and we took a deep dive. Not as deep a dive as the 7 episodes, of course, that Jason did, but we talked all about calendars and all kind of crazy stuff, and it was really fun.
Yeah, definitely check out Enoch, because if you want to understand early Christianity, and this isn't just my view, more and more scholars are espousing this view. If you want to understand early Christianity, you need to read Enoch. It is extremely important. I found 17 references to Enoch just in Paul's letter to the Romans, which is only 15 chapters. That's a lot. And it keeps going like that. Every one of his letters, and Paul's letters are our earliest Christian writings that survived. Okay, they predate the Gospels by decades. And he is constantly referencing things that's found in Enoch, and even things that are in Enoch that you cannot find in the Old Testament, things that contradict the Old Testament. So it is extremely important to learn about that if you want to learn about just the worldview and the context of the New Testament authors. Their worldview was influenced by writings similar to Enoch. So definitely check that out, because my treatment of it is the most in-depth that you will find in podcast format to date. That does not include conspiracy theories like the Earth is 6,000 years old or aliens did it. So so definitely check that out. Episodes 48 to 54 of the podcast, and all those episodes are on YouTube as well. So
well worth your time. So Jason, once again, people can find you at any podcast app.
Download a podcast app. Your phone probably already has one. Search Dragons and Genesis. It's a big orange logo with Godzilla attacking Jerusalem. You can't miss it. If you don't want to do that, go to facebook.com/Dragons and Genesis. You can also look me up online at dragonsandgenesis.com. You'll find links to the latest episodes. I'm on YouTube, youtube.com/Dragons and Genesis podcast. If you have Bible mythology related questions, then send me a question through any of those things. Facebook is preferred because I check that more often, but also you can email me, dragonsandgenesis@gmail.com. I will answer your questions in a video on my YouTube channel. So you ask a Bible question, it becomes a video, and I answer your question like that. Each question gets its own video. I recently did one about whether or not early Christians were all vegetarians, and it was actually based, that particular notion comes from material that we actually just talked about concerning the pagan meat. So that's on there. Were the early Christians all vegetarians? I just answered that question a couple of weeks ago. Check it out on my YouTube channel. So yeah, there you go.
Fantastic. Jack, what do you have coming up, brother? How are things going at Satan Central?
They are in the midst of planning for their big Lupercalia festival in February. I don't have a whole lot of details yet. If you go to at TSTVHQ on the Twitters, you can keep up with all the stuff that they're announcing. It's going to be a whole other thing like it was the last couple months when they do things at VHQ where they're actually, no, maybe next week. I know there's a thing that I would love to tell you about that I don't think I can tell you about yet, because we don't have everything locked. I hate to do it to you because I would love to tell you about this, but I don't think I can just yet. I don't think it's been, signed off that we definitely know what's going on with who. But there's going to be fun things going on there for Lupercalia. So go to tstvhq.com, buy tickets, because that's awesome. And otherwise, I'm here on Sundays, and I might start doing some other media stuff if I can find the time around all this other stuff.
Right. So I am still doing the morning show tomorrow, 9:00 in the morning Eastern. For those of you who wanted to talk about politics, we're talking politics tomorrow. That's for sure. Right. Inauguration Day's only a little while away. And we'll be talking about news. We'll be having fun. We'll be having laughs. and it's going to be a lot of fun tomorrow. 9 o'clock in the morning. Come back here. How's that? And Jason, once again, sir, Jason Foux, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, sir, to have you on the channel.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's a blast. It's always fun talking to you. And I'm always, flattered that anyone would invite me onto their show to listen to me prattle about the Bible. So thanks for having me on, man. Thanks for inviting me. And Jack, it's great to meet you.
Yeah, you too, man.
All right. Well, hey, everyone in the chat, thanks for showing up. This is always fun. Always great interacting with you. Take care, everyone. Be strong.